Chapter 8. Christianity Seeks Moral Transformation. Racism hardens the heart. Christianity seeks moral transformation. This topic touches on something psychologists and Christian thinkers have both recognized for centuries. What we repeatedly think, feel, and do eventually changes who we become. Human beings are not static. Our attitudes shape our character. Our repeated thoughts shape our perceptions. Our repeated actions shape our habits. Over time, habits shape the heart. From a psychological perspective, racism is not merely a collection of beliefs about another group. It can become a habit of perception, a way of seeing the world that gradually changes a person's emotional and moral life. Christianity, by contrast, speaks about the transformation of the heart and mind. It teaches that people are not meant to remain trapped in destructive patterns, but are called to become more loving, compassionate, merciful, and just. The two paths move in opposite directions. When people first engage in prejudice, they often experience some inner discomfort. Part of them recognizes this isn't quite right. There may be guilt, there may be hesitation, there may be an uneasy feeling that they are being unfair. But the human mind has an extraordinary ability to adapt. If a person repeatedly entertains prejudiced thoughts, repeats stereotypes, laughs at degrading jokes, or treats people unfairly, something begins to happen. The behavior starts feeling normal. Psychologists call this desensitization. The conscience becomes less reactive. What once felt wrong starts feeling acceptable. What once felt shocking starts feeling ordinary. Repeated exposure to an attitude or behavior often reduces emotional sensitivity to it. For example, the first time someone hears a cruel stereotype, they may feel uncomfortable. The 100th time, they may barely notice. Not because the stereotype became less harmful, but their emotional response has weakened. This process is sometimes called moral numbing. The person does not suddenly become cruel overnight. Instead, they gradually become less sensitive to the humanity of others. This is one reason prejudice can become deeply entrenched. The conscience slowly loses its sharpness. Modern psychology increasingly recognizes that much of human behavior operates through habit. Habits are powerful because they bypass conscious deliberation. A person does not have to actively choose a prejudice every time. Eventually, it becomes automatic. When they encounter someone from a certain group, assumptions appear automatically. Suspicion appears automatically. Judgments appear automatically. The prejudice becomes part of the mental operating system. What began as a belief becomes a reflex. This is why racism can be so difficult to uproot. The issue is no longer just intellectual. It has become habitual. One of the most dangerous consequences of hardened prejudice is the gradual loss of empathy. Empathy is like a muscle. The more it is exercised, the stronger it becomes. The less it is used, the weaker it becomes. When people repeatedly dismiss the suffering of a particular group, they begin training themselves not to care. Eventually, stories that should provoke compassion produce indifference. Pain becomes easier to ignore. Injustice becomes easier to excuse. Suffering becomes easier to overlook. The heart becomes hardened. Christianity offers a radically different vision. Instead of accepting moral hardening as inevitable, Christianity teaches that people can be transformed. The New Testament repeatedly speaks of renewing the mind, softening the heart, growing in love, developing compassion, becoming more like Christ. Psychologically, this aligns with what we know about human development. Just as destructive habits can be learned, healthy habits can also be cultivated. People can train themselves toward greater empathy, greater humility, greater patience, greater compassion. Transformation is possible because human beings remain capable of change. One striking feature of Jesus' life is his responsiveness to human suffering. Again and again, the Gospels describe him being moved by compassion. He notices people, he stops for people, he listens to people, he responds to people. Psychologically, compassion keeps the heart alive. Compassion requires openness. Hardness requires emotional distance. The more someone imitates Christ's compassion, the harder it becomes to sustain prejudice. The more someone indulges prejudice, the harder it becomes to sustain compassion. The two tendencies compete with one another. Imagine a man named Harold. Harold grew up in an era when racist attitudes were common within his community. As a young boy, he hears jokes and stereotypes regularly. At first, he occasionally feels uncomfortable. Some of the comments seem harsh, but everyone around him laughs. Nobody challenges them. Gradually, he learns that this is normal. The slow hardening. Over the years, Harold has adopted many of the same attitudes. He rarely thinks about them critically. The beliefs simply become part of his worldview. When he encounters people from a certain racial group, assumptions automatically arise. He does not see this as prejudice. He sees it as common sense. That is one of the dangers of moral hardening. The person often stops recognizing it. For most of his life, Harold has had very little meaningful contact with the people he stereotypes. They remain distant, abstract, theoretical. The prejudice survives because reality never challenges it. Everything begins changing when Harold's granddaughter Emily starts university. There she forms friendships with people from many different racial backgrounds. One day she brings several friends home. Among them is a young woman named Naomi. Naomi belongs to the group Harold has spent decades viewing negatively. Initially, Harold remains polite but distant. Old habits remain strong. Over the next several years, Naomi becomes a frequent visitor. Harold gradually learns about her life. He learns about her ambitions, her kindness, her struggles, her family, her faith. When Naomi's mother becomes seriously ill, Harold watches her care for her with extraordinary devotion. When Harold's wife later passes away, Naomi attends the funeral and quietly supports the family through their grief. Something begins happening inside him. The stereotypes no longer fit. The person standing before him is too real, too human, too compassionate. One evening, Harold reflects on the contrast between his beliefs and his experience. He realizes something painful. For decades, he had spoken confidently about people he never truly knew. His opinions had been inherited rather than examined. His prejudice had survived largely because of distance. The realization humbles him. Around the same time, Harold becomes more serious about his faith. As he studies the life of Jesus, he notices a recurring theme. Jesus moves toward people, not away from them. Toward the sick, toward the rejected, toward the outsider, toward those others dismiss. Harold begins asking himself, if Christ consistently moved toward people, why have I spent so much of my life creating distance? The question lingers. Slowly, his heart begins softening. The transformation is not instantaneous. Decades of habits do not disappear overnight. Sometimes old assumptions still surface, but now Harold notices them, challenges them, rejects them. This is an important part of the transformation. The goal is not perfection, the goal is growth. Over time, compassion replaces suspicion. Curiosity replaces judgment. Humility replaces certainty. Psychologically, racism can become a habit that gradually hardens the heart. Repeated prejudice dulls empathy, weakens compassion, desensitizes the conscience. The person may not become overtly cruel, but they often become less responsive to the humanity and suffering of others. Christianity points in the opposite direction. It calls people toward ongoing moral transformation, a continual reshaping of the heart and mind toward love, mercy, justice, humility, and compassion. The hardened heart says, I already know what those people are like. The transformed heart says, teach me to see people as God sees them. The hardened heart grows increasingly closed. The transformed heart grows increasingly open. And over a lifetime, those two paths lead to profoundly different kinds of people.